not only are we getting a new Superman and Spider-Man crossover comic, but also there is going to be an opportunity next year in 2026, early on, I believe about January 7th, to own a piece of comic book history. And then also on February 4th of 2026. Now, this is very important because if you are a fan of these characters, a lot of us grew up with characters like Superman, Spider-Man, Marvel, DC, all these different brands and superheroes and things like that. If you are someone where these characters affected your lives, you've probably at least a couple times come across the things like Amalgam Comics or the DC versus Marvel comics or a handful of crossovers here and there. It's not something that's very common, and especially during an age of DC where they were kind of run more by the decisions of a man like Dan Didio. He really just pushed back against almost all of them, didn't want that to be a thing, and so a lot of opportunities were squandered when it came to seeing characters like this who inspired people together. But almost 50 years ago, there was actually a comic book, which was Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. And then as well, later on, there was also Superman and Spider-Man Treasury Edition, which was another crossover. So this has happened before, but it's important because there was a big crossover this year with Batman and Deadpool, and it's actually not quite over yet. There is another issue coming out. The one went Batman/Deadpool, and the other one went Deadpool/Batman. I haven't talked about that crossover entirely, except for just saying I was excited for it. Even though one of those issues is out, I do plan to talk about it when both are out. But, long story short, this is really cool to me because not only is there going to be a new Superman-Spider-Man crossover, but they're also reprinting some of the old ones, which were not exactly super easy to get. And unfortunately, some of these things weren't even included. Some of these crossovers, like I believe there was a JLA Avengers one and a couple others that weren't included when the omnibus of crossovers was reprinted. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about this today, but I did have a question for you, which is, if you could see a crossover of two characters, I'm thinking Marvel and DC, specifically in comics, what would you want to see? Which characters would you want to meet? What would you want that story to be about? I'd be interested to hear that in the comments down below. Now, Superman and Spider-Man are two characters that I think have had a massive impact on people for generations. And unfortunately, when it comes to comic books, now, maybe you're a huge fan of them to this day, of all the long-running characters, maybe not. But for me, I have kind of fallen out of the long-running serialized comic books, like a character like Spider-Man, where he's in the Earth 616, and he just doesn't really develop because they want to keep returning to the status quo. I think Superman's been better with that, but in general, the unfortunate thing with comic books is that a lot of these characters stagnated sometime, I would say, around the early 2000s, where editorial decided that they should not develop past certain points. And so because of that, for me, there hasn't been a lot to excite me with comic books, especially from Marvel and DC, with the exception being more standalone universes, things like the Ultimate Universe for Marvel or the Absolute Universe for DC. These serialized characters, it gets very hard for me to get invested in storylines with them, knowing that the character will return to a status quo later on, especially Spider-Man. So the reason I'm saying that is because this is an event that I actually think is special. This is an event that I actually think, while I'm not sure if it will permanently push the character forward, could be a really good way to explore modern Spider-Man, add to the mythos, see how he compares to Clark Kent, have these two characters meet these two titans that had so much to do with a lot of our childhoods, be on page together again. I just don't think it's something that a lot of people expected. And when the Deadpool and Batman issue was announced, it was like, okay, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see more. This goes to show you that already that has been a success. This is greenlit. It is happening. I will hopefully revisit it and talk about it more when it comes out, because there are not a lot of details yet, except that it's going to happen in 2026. But I'm excited because I think reprinting these gives people the opportunity to physically own a piece of history. I know it's not the original issue. I don't care. I still think reprints are cool. And going forward with this gives us an opportunity to see new glimpses and new sides of these iconic characters that we haven't seen in many, many years, and don't see very often at all, because they're not even owned by the same publishing companies. You know, they're not, it's not like with Spider-Man where Black Cat's going to show up all the time. Superman's not going to show up all the time in a Spider-Man comic book. It's just not, it's not going to happen. So for us to now be in a time where it is going to happen, I don't know. I just think it's really neat, and I wanted to share that with you for just a couple minutes. I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, you want to leave a like, subscribe. I appreciate that very much. Also, if you're a fan of these characters, like comic book characters, superhero characters, things like that, we also have our own store, cosmobunny.shop. There is actually a very temporary sale going on right now. Using code MOON, M-O-O-N, you can get 20% off an order. And we are actually doing coasters, keychains, trays, and more over there from recycled paper. So these are from comics, manga, magazines, and more that have been damaged, can't be sold to people. We take those, we transform them into something else, repurpose that paper, and use resin to create one-of-a-kind pieces for your home. And then we recycle the rest of that paper. So like I said, discount code MOON, or if you find this later and that's not working because the sale ended, DJAY123 for 10% off your first purchase. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I just thought this was really fun. I wanted to share it very briefly. As always, everyone, stay shway.